Welcome to the Stockholm International Film Festival.
Thank you.
You're here with the film Adama.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit about the narrative in the film?
It's so the title is Adama. It's the name of the main character, and Adama is 12 years old. He's a West African kid. It's not really defined. Probably coming from north of Mali, and he's always been raised into the not really knowing what's outside of his village. And his older brother Samba is 16, 17, and one day disappears. And Adama decides to go away from the village and search for his older brother, only to find out that we're in 1916 and his brother has been drafted in the French military as a colonial force for the First World War. So it's really a coming-of-age tale between Africa and Europe during the war.
Why did you want to make this film?
Why?
Yeah.
First of all, there's the historical fact that the colonial force, the so-called black force, is something that existed and thousands and thousands of African soldiers were drafted when French military needed more men. And for Julien, the scriptwriter, and myself, it was a good way to reflect on the history between, the shared history we have with Africa as French people, but even the shared history between Europe and Africa through these historical facts, because we believe it reflects to all of what happened during the last century, and also now with migrants, and also what's happening.
It's not common in animated features that the main character is a person of color. Was that like... Have you gotten any reactions because of that?
Well,
because you like tell another story?
the reactions we had, there never was proper censorship or anything, but the reactions we had is that mostly that the subject is not really commercial, which means it made it harder to put it together. It's also because it's a part of history that France doesn't necessarily wants to turn back to, and also it's also a kid in the war, and it's a film for children, and we say it's about 7, 8 years old can start watching it, and also for adults. So it has this double target. So all these elements made it look not commercial enough for many financiers. But we always kept on believing that we would make it happen, and we always had, between all the impossibilities that we found out, we always had one good possibility every time. So it made us keep on going. But it's really the kind of film that we didn't know was impossible, so we did it, sort of. But and that's also why it took several years. It took 8 years altogether.
Did you feel like you had to fight harder to make this film just because the main character is not white?
I never really seen it that way. I think we had to fight harder for this film because we really wanted to keep our independence, not make it more commercial than it should be, and that's really how I felt it. I never really thought of it as oh, we're having struggles. We were struggling because we have a black character. I've never seen it like that. Maybe it's part of the equation. Of course it is. We had Kirikou, which is a very, very successful film with a main character that's a black, much younger kid, and it's a very different film, obviously. But I think it feels like Kirikou has somehow prepared the ground for having a black protagonist as a main character.
That film was also French, right?
It was French too, yeah.
You mentioned the black forces. Do you think that's something that a lot of people don't know about?
Yeah, most people don't know about it. I wouldn't even say that I really knew about it before Julien Lilti came to me with the subject matter. It's something that somehow in a blurry part of memory we heard of, especially because there's been very much a lot of sort of positive propaganda during the First World War and also Second World War. We have the Banania It's a brand of chocolate with on the imagery for the whole century was a black force soldier with a big smile, very caricatural. So it's part of the collective consciousness somehow, but people don't really know about it, especially in France. People might have heard of it, and outside of France, people really don't know about it. And for instance, the main character was played by a kid called Aziz Diabaté. He was 12 at the time we recorded the voices, and his parents are from Mali. He's French. He grew up in Paris. He said he never heard of it. So it's really, for us, it's really, if the film can help, at least just to acknowledge this, it's fine. We're not doing the film to turn back and reopen old wounds at all. It's really much more to mention this shared history and just trying to move on with those starting points.
Technically, how did you make the film?
It's a mix of different techniques. It was made really thinking about the subjective storytelling. It's all really an initiatory tale. So we really wanted to have the story told through the eyes of Adama in a very extreme way, sort of creating a camera that would reflect what he sees. So, and also the characters had to be quite human because there's a documentary aspect to the story. So we worked with the clay figures, small clay figures, that really, for me, were the best way to balance this between animated characters and human beings. Hopefully that halfway into the film, the audience might forget that they're actually not having, they might think that they have human beings in front of them. So we used the sculptures and we found out that we could 3D scan them and have them exactly as they were on the screen. So it was always a matter of balancing traditional techniques like clay sculptures, very ancient, and very much new technologies, sort of blurring the lines between 2D, 3D, or even live action. We didn't care about those boundaries at all.
I think it's a very visually compelling film, and I think some shots almost look like paintings. Where did you get inspiration, like, I mean, visually for the backgrounds and backdrops?
Yes, I would say there's been so many different inspirations going through the film, but I'm from a very much, I'm a graffiti artist originally, and then I learned, I started to work for making frescoes and paintings, and then I learned the craft of painting, sculpting. So I have this kind of both hip hop and classic background, so I guess it depends on that culture. I thought Impressionist paintings were also a good reference because to me they're a good balance between subjectivity and science. You know, Impressionist paintings have those two aspects, and they were created when photography was also being invented. So, and we create Adama while 3D scanning is being invented. So I think those paintings reflect a good balance between science and art, and there's always been this kind of dialogue. So, there's been many other influences, of course, cinematographic influence and all kinds of influences.
Is there any special movies that inspired you for this movie?
There's been many different ones, but we definitely watch Ivan's Childhood, first Tarkovsky film, and 400 Blows, or even also anime film from Japan like Miyazaki's work. Many different things, any war film we could find. We also watched a lot of ethnographic films from Jean Rouch that were shot in the 50s and 60s. I remember having influence from Buddha Collapsed Out of Shame, from Mac Malbaf. Well, you know, it's been a long process, and it was really a background task of writing this film for years, and anything we've learned, everything we've watched, and we could pick something and really have that influence into the film. So,
for how long did you work on this film, from start to finish?
I would say Julien had the original idea to speak about the Black Force in '98. So it's a while ago, and he lived with this idea of making a film about Black Force, whether it would be a documentary or a live action feature film. a narrative because he heard of that story in '98 when the last foot soldier passed away. And I met him in 2007, and at that time he wanted to make animation film, and he saw one of my films and thought we could have a good match between the style of my films and what his idea was. So from then on we worked on the script for maybe 3 or 4 years, and then there was also 3 or 4 years of production, so 8 years altogether.
What was the biggest challenges in making the film?
I would say was the first one, the main one was trying to write the script, because we're going from a very historical facts that happen in millions different ways, and through all these possibles we had to find our own story, and it was really the backbone of the initiatory tale, and that helped us building the story in the way we did. And then of course the funding that we mentioned earlier, that was a really long process. And then once it gave us a good time to prepare, which is the good aspect of things. And then when it actually started, we managed to wrap it up in 2 years, which is quite fast. Pre-production 1 year, production 1 year. And the preparation made it able to find really the consistency between the image and the storytelling. So I don't think it would have been any better if we had managed to do it in a less time.
Do you have a message with the film that you hope the audience will bring with them when they leave the movie theater?
Of course, it's really, I mean, especially with reflecting to what's happened very recently in Paris, or the migrants topic that is getting bigger and bigger. We really, as I was saying, it's not to open old wounds and say that France has behaved this way or that way. It's really to acknowledge that we have a common and shared history, and try to use that as a starting point to give insight for kids like Aziz Diabaté and all his, children of that generation that are second or third generation of immigration from West Africa, North Africa. To give a meaning to the floor that they have their feet on, and not letting them being disconnected and then easily be twisted around, I wouldn't, it's really in the film, it's really a film about identity as well. The main character is sort of the first kid who ever has to do his own initiation without being helped by any adults, and I think it's something we all experienced ourselves, and he really takes clues and understanding of the world right now, also looking back at where he's from. So it's a film about war, and there's no big bad guy in the film. The enemy is the war. You don't see any other enemies. You don't see the German fighters or anything. It's really abstract, and the enemy is the war. So of course we're trying to send a peace message, trying to move on with what France is today and Europe is today, and I guess that's the message.
You mentioned migration, which is also this year's spotlight for the festival, and Adama has been picked for that section. How do you feel about being in that section?
I'm happy being in this section because, first of all, I'm happy that the film is being picked in different festivals for different sections. It was in the Chicago Children Film Festival, and at the same time the Chicago Film Festival for adults. Sometimes it's in specialized animation film festivals like Ottawa, and here it's in a not animated film festival. I think it's one of there's only 2 animated features I think this year in Stockholm, and it's going to the migration spotlight. So it reflects all the different subject matters that the film could be bringing up, and of course the reasons why we definitely chose to bring reasons for the older brother to leave his village. We on purpose made them similar to the reasons why young people nowadays could be leaving their villages, to reflect about the actual migration, economical migrant situation. We didn't expect at all that when the film would be finished, the subject would have grown so much. because in 2007 it was something that, of course, we were really aware of because we traveled in West Africa and met all those people who were on their way trying to reach Europe. But now it's getting really central, and so it was not on purpose, but it's really one of the subjects we wanted to treat.
Did you go to West Africa in preparation for the film?
Yes, I've been there in preparation. I've been there before even having ever heard about this Julien Lulty, and I did a short film about my experience there, and that's the film he saw, and then that's why he met me. I'm just back from West Africa. I was in Senegal and Mali last week, and had a couple of screenings there, and it was really interesting to have also the feedback of people there, because it's definitely a French film and also addresses a lot to European audiences. And I was curious of the reaction of African audiences about the subject matter, and it was a very good experience. I think it worked over there.
Do you have like a dream project in the future?
Yes, I have dream project that make films that could change the world, but it's really hard. And right now, any project that I would have had last week is being sort of completely turned upside down with what happened last week, and it's really hard. I think today I feel it's really hard today to find a subject matter that you feel would really be worth taking the time. I mean, that's how I feel today. I'm definitely gonna try to make other films, but I need some time really now to think about what they should be.
When that time has come, when you feel ready to make another films, is it important that all the films that you want to make, that you want them to have a positive influence?
Yes, for me it's very important. I mean, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be personal. It doesn't mean that they should all be political documentaries, but they could be very abstract. I'm not saying everybody should suddenly make political documentaries, but it's one of my, when you spend 7 or 8 years on a project, you have to think that it's useful. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it. So it has to, any project that takes you through all these years has to have different aspects, and one of them being that you think is going to be useful. The other ones have to be a personal interest, so that you can send emotions to the audience, of course. But yeah,